Welcome to Reinventors Roundtable in the Reinvent America series. And this week, we're actually going to reinvent long-term thinking, or in the words of the anchor, Longpath thinking. Why don't we start with what is your kind of critique of the current state of how people think of the long term or how they think the future is?
This really started a couple of years ago for me when I was in conversations with lots of different clients. And I was asking them, what I thought was a very simple question. Where do you want to be in 5 years? Where do you want to be in 7 years? Where do you want to be in 10 years? And clients from all sectors, from corporate to government agency, were all saying, Ari, that's a great question, but I literally need to think about the next 3 months, the next 12 months. Because the future isn't something that people talk about, in the sense that the future is very much either totally dystopian, or it's what I call the jetpack future, where it's kind of this techno-utopian future. Is long-term, goal-oriented thinking something that we can embed in society from the individual kind of granular all the way up to the organizational and even nation state and global level?
I actually think that a lot of people think about the future all the time. I think the problem is they think about a single future, this idea of multiple futures, because then that forces you to confront a set of ideas that might not be the reality that you're living in today. When I bring, 60-year-old economists together with 20-year-olds, they're actually living in different economies. It's fascinating. They can sort of look at different futures, but they actually live in different presents.
What is the capacity building exercise that needs to occur over the next 50, 60, 100 years to help embed the practice of long-term thinking in future generations?
Is this an American malaise thing? In Europe, there's a very long term view here. It's a little historical at times, I must confess.
When the overarching frame was very much around religion and God, you had almost a guiding long path framework, both for who you were as a people and why you were here on planet Earth. Are we kind of doomed to be even more present because we've got rid of the old man with the big white beard that was always kind of looking down on us, that forced us to think about the future?
I do think this desire to think about the future and have a longer path view is innate in us.
Thinking in the long term is in our bones.
It's hardwired in us, and if we can just tap the opportunities, we can actually really reactivate that deep sense in ourselves and as a culture.
I agree that people are actually natural futurists. It's when they start looking at the complexity of their own company or their own institution that they're in, is when they may become overwhelmed by the notion of getting everybody on the same page.
What new features are happening in modern society here that would allow us and would bolster essentially more this long-term thinking?
One thing to look at are some really excellent examples where people and projects have been extremely successful because they did take the long term very seriously. Amazon, their very first shareholder letter said, we are going to make decisions that confuse you because they're about the longer term investment. We often look at their near term successes and attribute them to what they did last quarter, but if you actually look at what they did, it's because they were taking a longer perspective. I think that if we, for instance, as humanity saw an asteroid that was going to hit us in 100 years and wipe out the planet, we would have a new long-term goal that we would all get underneath.
There is a kind of a worry that gets deep in me a little bit, is that the empowerment of everybody, that we haven't really figured out how to institutionalize the channeling to get kind of consensus on long-term thinking.
Is American democracy, participatory democracy as it is, incompatible with long-term thinking? Just this past weekend, China came out with their 10-year plan, right? And they tend to really stick to these plans. Is the only way to have true long-term, long-path policy is via an authoritarian or quasi-authoritarian regime?
I think that we've seen that American democracy has been perfectly capable of making very smart long-term decisions. FDR enacted Social Security, the space program, the Kennedy administration.
Once everybody's involved, you have very different organizational capacity than simply if a few elite are involved. And that is an argument for democracy.
We need to make really sure that When we do this, it's not elite.
Why think about the future? It helps us make better decisions in the present, in the here and now, because it's a new perspective.
We have a responsibility to deal on these long-term cycles because we can, and we now have that technology to see it as well as affect it.
This idea of meaning and spirituality and who are we as a people, I think we're at a point now where, and given this conversation, we can really start actually asking those questions and kind of moving into that, and that leaves me very, very optimistic.